Up next, a story of gifting that we stumbled across at our new producer training last October. One of the people there was Daniel Boone Sharp, who was a school teacher in Kingsley, and he had an interest in preserving some of his grandmother's stories, and one in particular stood out, the story of her piano. Now, in this age of commercialism, it is rare that a gift can change someone's life, but that's exactly what the piano in this next story did.
I learned to play the piano along with a neighbor girl. We would go into town, into this small town where there was a teacher, and she gave us lessons. And then as the years piled up, I have always kept playing the piano.
As I was growing up, my grandmother lived in an old farmhouse not 300 yards behind us, and when I'd visit, more oftentimes than not, she'd be playing her piano. It was an old upright Kanabi she bought without first consulting my frugal grandfather.
Nelson was an aircraft mechanic. He was gone a lot because at that time in the history of our country, aircraft mechanics were needed. And all my life, we had a piano in our home on the big old farm in Mantaway, Ohio, where I was born and raised. So the spirit moved me to get on the bus in Arlington, Virginia, ride over into the District of Columbia. I walked into a store where they had pianos. The spirit seemed to take a hold of me, and from a financial viewpoint, it was the most stupid thing I've ever done in my life. I paid every bit of my teacher's retirement money for that piano. And so it was delivered, and more when I would be alone, it was comforting to get out some of the old music that I'm fond of, usually classic, some religious. And of course, I do like Bach music. And so the piano, it has become an old friend. And at times when I think about all my beautiful, precious family, the piano is a part of it.
My grandmother is now 95 years old. She lives in an assisted living apartment on Boardman Lake. We moved her there a year ago, 3 years after my grandfather passed away. It was difficult for her to sell the old farmhouse. Harder still, the piano had to be left behind. The apartment at her assisted living building was too small for the old upright. No one wanted it. It was too big, too old, and too heavy. So we were actually relieved when the buyer of the house agreed to take it. But Cheryl, the activities director at Grandma's assisted living complex, didn't think that arrangement was quite good enough.
One afternoon, Blanche and I were sitting in the living room talking, and she was telling me about her piano and how she ended up purchasing it and how many years it followed her through all the moves that she had with her and her husband. And I just thought in my mind, she has to have that piano. She has to have it back. And I didn't say anything to her, so that's when after we got done with our little visit in the living room, I talked to her daughter. So I said, we have to get Blanche the piano.
So my mother called the family that bought Grandma's house and asked if they'd consider allowing us to back out of the piano agreement. They said they certainly understood and we could have the piano back. So I drove with 3 other people from the assisted living the 90 miles to Big Rapids and loaded the old Kanabi onto ramps and into the trailer. We arrived around lunchtime when all the residents were coming down the hall to eat. The assistant manager, Meredith, helped clear the way for the piano's arrival.
Of course, we got here, perfect timing, just at lunch, and I will never forget this. The piano came in, and she looked at you, and the piano was all covered up, and she said, Dan, what are you doing here? And you said, well, they needed a little help moving a piano. She said, oh. And then, Blanche, you looked at the piano again, and you looked at the pedals.
I happened to glance down at the pedals, and all of a sudden, it dawned on me, this is my old Kanabi. This is my old friend. And when I get excited, I whoop and holler. I'm not a quiet celebrator. And so many of us in the room, we were so overcome with emotion and the significance of the whole thing. We were crying, we were laughing, we were hugging. And it is one of the most beautiful moments in my whole life.
And Grandma, do you remember what you played, the first song that you played on your piano when you were reunited?
Well, I played How Great Thou Art. What pleases me, quite often at night, I think about the piano and the pleasure that it is giving the residents who live here. They like it when I go down and practice or play for short periods of time. So I can look from my apartment, I can see that piano down there, and the piano has a final resting place. It will be here. And I want you to always remember the bottom line as I go through life is this: when life has a way of pulling you down, always remember that music can lift you above it.
When I asked my grandmother why she played How Great Thou Art, she said simply, "It speaks to me. I like the words." And as she pounded out the last chord, everyone clapped and wiped their eyes. Since being reunited with her piano, she's been playing for memorial services for the many friends she's lost in the past year. She's also been on the road with the lay minister playing the old hymns at worship services during the week. At 95, Blanche is on tour. I'm Daniel Boone Sharp for Radio Anyway.